Sarah's hand shook as she folded her few belongings into the worn leather satchel. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wooden floor of her family's cabin, and she could hear her mother crying softly in the kitchen. Today was the day everything would change forever. Her father had made the arrangement months ago, when the harsh winter had nearly killed their livestock and left the family with barely enough food to survive. The Modoc man, Thomas Redcloud, had offered them supplies and money in exchange for a bride. Sarah had never seen him before, but the stories people told made her stomach twist with fear and curiosity. He's a strange one, the townspeople whispered. Lives alone in the mountains with those twin boys of his. Never comes to town except for supplies. Some say his wife died in childbirth, others say she ran away. But those children, they have the strangest eyes. Sarah touched the simple wooden cross around her neck, a gift from her grandmother. At 18, she had always imagined her wedding day would be different. She had dreamed of marrying someone from town, someone she had grown up with and fallen in love with naturally. Instead, she was being given away to a man she had never met, in a transaction that felt more like selling cattle than joining two lives together. The sound of horses approaching made everyone in the house freeze. Sarah's younger brother peeked through the curtains and announced in a whisper that 3 riders were coming up the path. Her mother quickly wiped her tears and smoothed her apron, trying to look presentable for the man who was taking her daughter away. When the knock came at the door, Sarah's father opened it slowly. Thomas Redcloud stood on the threshold, and Sarah got her first look at the man who would be her husband. He was tall and lean, with weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark hair was pulled back simply, and his eyes were the color of deep forest shadows. Behind him stood 2 boys who looked to be about 12 years old. The twins were identical in every way except for their eyes. One had eyes as blue as a summer sky, while the others were green like spring leaves. They stood perfectly still, watching everything with an intensity that made Sarah uncomfortable. There was something almost otherworldly about the way they observed the world around them. Thomas spoke in a quiet voice that commanded attention, without being loud. "I have come for Sarah, as we agreed." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch, which he handed to her father. The sound of coins clinking together seemed unnaturally loud in the silent room. Sarah's mother stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "You will take care of her? You will treat her well?" The desperation in her mother's voice made Sarah's heart ache. She knew her parents would not have made this choice if they had any other option. Thomas nodded once, his gaze moving to Sarah for the first time. When their eyes met, she felt something she had not expected. There was kindness there, buried beneath layers of sadness and secrets. "She will be safe," he said simply. "She will be respected." The blue-eyed twin stepped forward and spoke for the first time. "We have prepared a place for her." His voice was clear and mature, too adult for someone his age. The green-eyed twin remained silent, but Sarah caught him studying her with an expression she could not read. As Sarah gathered her courage to step toward her new life, she noticed something strange. The twins moved in perfect synchronization, as if they shared one mind between 2 bodies. When one shifted his weight, the other did the same. When one turned his head, the other followed the exact same movement a heartbeat later. Thomas seemed to notice her observation. "Jacob and Joshua are special children," he said quietly. "You will understand in time." There was something in his voice that suggested this was both a promise and a warning. Sarah kissed her parents goodbye, trying not to cry as she felt her mother's tears on her cheek. Her father pressed a small silver locket into her hand, whispering that it had belonged to her grandmother and would bring her luck. She clutched it tightly as she walked toward the horse Thomas had brought for her. As they rode away from the only home she had ever known, Sarah glanced back once to see her family standing in the doorway, growing smaller with each step of the horses. The mountains ahead looked mysterious and forbidding, shrouded in morning mist that seemed to hide secrets in its folds. The twins rode on either side of Thomas, their movements still unnaturally synchronized. Sarah found herself wondering what kind of life awaited her in the remote mountain cabin, and what secrets Thomas Redcloud was hiding about himself and these strange, silent boys who seemed to see everything and understand far more than children their age should. The journey ahead would take them deeper into the wilderness, away from everything familiar and safe. Sarah whispered a prayer to herself, asking for strength and wisdom to face whatever lay ahead. She had no idea that the secret Thomas carried would change everything she thought she knew about the world, and that her arrival would set in motion events that would challenge everything she believed about what was possible. The mountain cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fairy tale, but not the pleasant kind. It was larger than Sarah had expected, built from dark logs that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. Smoke curled from the chimney, and gardens surrounded the house in neat, precise rows that looked too perfect to be natural. As they approached, Sarah noticed that the twins dismounted their horses at exactly the same moment, their feet touching the ground in perfect unison. They moved toward the house without looking back, their silent communication continuing in ways that made her skin crawl with unease. Thomas helped her down from her horse, his touch gentle but brief. "Welcome to your new home," he said, and for the first time since meeting him, she heard something that might have been nervousness in his voice. He glanced toward the house where the twins had disappeared, and Sarah caught a flicker of worry cross his weathered features. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. The main room had a large stone fireplace, handmade furniture that showed skilled craftsmanship, and windows that let in streams of golden light. Everything was clean and organized, but there was something sterile about the perfection. It felt like a house where people lived but did not truly make it a home. The twins sat at a wooden table watching her with their mismatched eyes. Jacob, the one with blue eyes, finally spoke. "Father has prepared the room at the end of the hall for you. We have made sure everything is ready." His formal way of speaking continued to unnerve her. Children his age should be running around outside, not sitting perfectly still and talking like small adults. Joshua, the green-eyed twin, added quietly, "The garden needs tending. Mother used to care for it, but since she left, Father has struggled to keep everything growing properly." There was something in the way he said "left" that made Sarah suspect there was more to the story than a simple departure. Thomas shot a sharp look at Joshua, and the boy immediately fell silent. The tension in the room became thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah realized she had stumbled into a family with carefully guarded secrets, and she was now part of whatever complex web of mysteries surrounded Thomas and his sons. That evening, Thomas showed her to her room. It was simple but comfortable, with a window that looked out over the mountain valley below. As he turned to leave, Sarah found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind all day. The boy's mother. What really happened to her? She watched his face carefully, looking for any clue about the truth behind the conflicting stories she had heard in town. Thomas paused in the doorway, his hand gripping the frame tightly. Maria was special. Like the boys, she could do things that most people cannot understand or accept. He was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. One day she simply vanished. No trace, no goodbye. Just gone. Do you think she's still alive? Sarah asked softly, sensing the pain behind his carefully controlled expression. I know she is, Thomas replied with surprising certainty. But whether she will ever return, he shook his head and left the sentence unfinished. Get some rest. Tomorrow you will begin to understand what life is like here. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. But sometime after midnight, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps in the hallway, but they were perfectly synchronized. Two people walking in exact unison, as if they shared one body and one mind. She crept to her door and pressed her ear against the wood. The twins were moving through the house, their breathing even and controlled. She heard them stop outside Thomas's room, and then came the most disturbing sound of all. They spoke in unison, their voices blending together into one eerie whisper. Father, she suspects something. We can feel her questions pressing against our thoughts like fingers against glass. Thomas's voice was tired when he responded. She is smart, just like Maria was. We cannot hide the truth from her forever. Should we show her? This came from Jacob's voice alone, breaking the unsettling harmony. Not yet, Thomas replied firmly. Let her settle in first. Let her learn to trust us before we reveal what we truly are. Sarah pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from gasping aloud. What were they? The question sent chills racing down her spine. She had married into a family that was hiding something supernatural, something that went far beyond the simple explanation of unusual children. The footsteps resumed their synchronized pattern, moving away from Thomas's door and back toward the twins' room. Sarah waited until the house was completely quiet before returning to her bed. But sleep was impossible. Her mind raced with possibilities, each more frightening than the last. In the morning, she watched the twins more carefully than before. They moved through their daily routines with an efficiency that seemed almost mechanical. They helped with breakfast, tended the garden, and completed their chores without ever needing to discuss who would do what. They simply knew, as if they shared one consciousness between their two bodies. During breakfast, Thomas noticed her careful observation. "You have questions," he said simply. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. "Many questions," Sarah admitted, setting down her fork. "But I'm not sure I'm ready for the answers." Joshua looked up from his plate, his green eyes serious beyond his years. "Readiness is not always a choice. Sometimes the truth finds you whether you want it or not." Jacob nodded in agreement. "And sometimes keeping secrets becomes more dangerous than revealing them." Thomas sighed deeply, running a hand through his dark hair. "Perhaps it is time," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Perhaps Maria was right when she said that isolation only makes the gift stronger and harder to control. Sarah felt her heart begin to race. Whatever secret this family carried, she was about to learn the truth. And somehow she knew that once she understood what made Thomas and his sons different from everyone else, her life would never be the same again. Thomas led Sarah outside after breakfast, the twins following behind in their unnaturally synchronized steps. The morning air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers from the garden. But Sarah barely noticed the beauty around her. Her nerves were stretched tight with anticipation and fear about what she was about to learn. They walked to a clearing behind the house where a circle of smooth stones had been arranged in a perfect pattern. Sarah had noticed it from her bedroom window but had assumed it was just a decorative garden feature. Now seeing it up close, she realized the stones were covered with symbols that looked ancient and mysterious. "Sit here," Thomas said gently, gesturing to a fallen log that served as a natural bench. His voice was kind, but Sarah could see the worry lines around his eyes. Whatever he was about to show her was clearly difficult for him to share. The twins took their positions on opposite sides of the stone circle, their movements still perfectly coordinated. Jacob's blue eyes seemed to glow brighter in the morning sunlight, while Joshua's green ones took on an almost emerald intensity. They stood completely still, barely seeming to breathe. "What you are about to see," Thomas began slowly, "is why we live alone in these mountains, why the townspeople whisper stories about us, why Maria disappeared." He paused, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. "My sons are not ordinary children. Neither was their mother, and neither am I." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, something incredible began to happen. The twins raised their hands at exactly the same moment, and the air around them started to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But this was different. The shimmer had colors in it, swirling patterns of light that danced between the boys' outstretched fingers. Sarah's mouth fell open in amazement and terror. She watched as small objects around the clearing began to lift into the air without anyone touching them. Leaves swirled in perfect spirals, stones rolled themselves into new patterns, and flowers turned their faces toward the twins as if drawn by an invisible force. "They're moving things with their minds," Sarah whispered, hardly believing what she was seeing. Her grandmother had told stories about people with such abilities, but Sarah had always thought they were just fairy tales meant to entertain children on long winter nights. "That's only part of it," Thomas said quietly. "Watch closer." The twins began to move in a slow, graceful dance around the stone circle. As they moved, the very air seemed to respond to their presence. Wind picked up and died down following their gestures. Clouds above them shifted and changed shape as if being molded by invisible hands. Most amazingly of all, the plants in the garden began to grow visibly, reaching toward the sky and bursting into bloom before Sarah's amazed eyes. But then something even more extraordinary happened. Jacob stumbled slightly, catching his foot on an uneven piece of ground. Instantly, Joshua stumbled in exactly the same way, even though the ground beneath his feet was perfectly smooth. When Jacob regained his balance, Joshua straightened at the exact same moment. "They're connected," Sarah breathed, finally understanding the strange behavior she had been observing. "They feel each other's experiences," Thomas nodded grimly. "They share more than just thoughts and feelings. They share pain, joy, hunger, tiredness. When one is hurt, the other feels it just as strongly. When one learns something new, the other knows it instantly. They are two bodies with one soul split between them." The demonstration came to an end and the twins walked back toward them. Sarah could see that they were tired from whatever they had just done, but they moved with the same synchronized steps as always. As they approached, she noticed something she had missed before. Around each boy's neck was a pendant that matched his eye color, blue stone for Jacob and green for Joshua. The pendants helped them control their abilities, Thomas explained, noticing her gaze. Without them, their power would be too strong. They might accidentally hurt someone or destroy something they didn't mean to damage. Joshua spoke first, his young voice serious and mature. We have been able to do these things since we were very small. At first, Father thought we were just unusually close brothers, but as we grew older, the abilities grew stronger. Jacob continued the thought seamlessly. We can hear each other's thoughts even when we're far apart. We can feel what the other feels, see what the other sees. Sometimes we forget which body we're supposed to be using and try to move the wrong arms and legs. Sarah felt her head spinning with the implications of what she was learning. And their mother, Maria, she could do these things too? Thomas's expression grew sad and distant. Maria was the most powerful person I have ever known. She could do everything the boys can do and more. She could heal injuries with just a touch, make plants grow in the middle of winter, and even see glimpses of future events in her dreams. Then why did she leave? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer would be painful to hear. She didn't leave by choice, Thomas said slowly. One morning she woke up screaming about a vision she had seen. Government men in dark suits were coming for the boys, wanting to take them away and study them like laboratory animals. She was terrified that our family would be torn apart. The twins exchanged a look that was heavy with shared memories. Jacob spoke quietly. Mother said she had to go away to protect us. She said that as long as she was here, the men in her vision would eventually find us, but if she disappeared, they would follow her trail instead of looking for us. Joshua added, She made Father promise to keep us hidden until we were old enough and strong enough to protect ourselves. She said someday she would come back for us, but only when it was safe. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she understood the sacrifice Maria had made. A mother had given up everything to protect her children, walking away from the family she loved to keep them safe from people who would exploit their gifts. That's why we need you, Thomas said gently. The boys need someone who can understand them and care for them the way their mother did. Someone who won't be afraid of what they can do. Someone who can help them learn to control their abilities and use them for good instead of accidentally causing harm. Sarah looked at the three males who were now her family, seeing them in a completely new light. They weren't just a lonely widower and his strange sons. They were people with extraordinary abilities trying to live normal lives while hiding from a world that would fear and persecute them for being different. Will you stay? Jacob asked quietly, his blue eyes hopeful but prepared for rejection. Will you help us learn to be the kind of people Mother wanted us to become? Sarah thought about her old life, her family's struggles, and the simple world she had left behind. Then she looked at the trust and hope in the faces around her, and she knew there was only one answer she could give. Sarah reached out and took both boys' hands in hers, feeling a strange tingling sensation the moment their skin touched. I'll stay, she said firmly. We're family now, and families stick together no matter what. The relief on Thomas's face was immediate and profound. For the first time since she had met him, he smiled genuinely. And Sarah could see glimpses of the man he might have been before worry and loneliness had carved lines around his eyes. The twins squeezed her hands gently, and she could swear she felt a brief flash of their emotions, gratitude and happiness so pure it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Over the following weeks, Sarah began to understand just how unusual her new life would be. The twins' abilities were far more complex than simple mind reading and object manipulation. They could sense approaching storms days before they arrived, communicate with animals in ways that seemed almost like conversation, and predict when the mountain's natural springs would shift their flow patterns. Most remarkably, they could share their abilities with people they trusted. When Sarah was working in the garden and struggling to reach a high branch, Jacob showed her how to extend her own energy to move objects with her mind. It was exhausting and she could only manage small movements, but the fact that it was possible at all amazed her. Everyone has some ability, Joshua explained during one of their afternoon lessons. Most people just never learn how to access it because they're taught from childhood that such things are impossible. But when you believe and practice, the power grows stronger. Thomas proved to be an excellent teacher, patient and understanding, as Sarah learned to accept and work with the family's unusual gifts. He showed her how to recognize the signs when the twins were using too much energy and needed to rest, how to help them focus their abilities more precisely, and most importantly, how to keep their secrets safe from the outside world. People fear what they don't understand, he explained one evening as they sat by the fireplace. And fear makes them dangerous. We've learned to live quietly and carefully, taking only what we need from the town and never drawing attention to ourselves. But as summer turned toward autumn, their peaceful existence began to show cracks. Sarah noticed that the twins were becoming restless and moody, their synchronized movements becoming less perfect and more erratic. Sometimes Jacob would start to speak and Joshua would finish his sentence, but with completely different words that made no sense together. They're growing apart, Thomas observed with worry when Sarah mentioned her concerns. As they get older, their individual personalities are becoming stronger. It's natural, but it's also dangerous. Their abilities work best when they're in perfect harmony with each other. The problem came to a head on a crisp October morning, when the twins had their first real argument. Sarah was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard shouting from the garden. She ran toward the sound and found Jacob and Joshua facing each other angrily, their pendant stones glowing brightly with unleashed energy. "I don't want to wear the same clothes as you anymore," Jacob was yelling, his blue eyes blazing with frustration. "I'm tired of everyone thinking we're exactly the same person." "Fine," Joshua shouted back, his green eyes equally bright with anger. "I don't want to share everything with you either. I want my own thoughts and my own feelings." The air around them began to crackle with electricity, and Sarah could see plants in the garden starting to wither as the twins' uncontrolled energy drained the life from everything nearby. Thomas came running from the house, his face pale with alarm. "Boys, stop," he commanded. But for the first time in their lives, the twins ignored their father's voice. Their anger was feeding on itself, growing stronger with each passing second. Sarah watched in horror as cracks began to appear in the ground between the twins, spreading outward like a spiderweb of destruction. The very earth was being torn apart by the conflict between two halves of what had once been a unified consciousness. Without thinking, Sarah stepped directly between the angry boys, placing herself in the path of their destructive energy. The moment she entered the space between them, she felt like she was being pulled apart by invisible hands. Every nerve in her body screamed in pain, but she forced herself to stay in place. "Look at me," she shouted over the roar of energy surrounding them. "Both of you, look at what you're doing." Gradually, the twins focused on her face instead of each other. Sarah could see the exact moment when they realized what their anger was causing. The horror in their expressions was immediate and devastating. "We're sorry," they said in perfect unison, their voices breaking with emotion. "We didn't mean to hurt you." The energy field collapsed instantly, leaving Sarah gasping and shaking but unharmed. Thomas reached her first, checking her over for injuries while the twins stood frozen with guilt and fear. "I'm okay," Sarah assured them all, though her voice was unsteady. "But we need to talk about this, all of us together." That evening, they gathered in the main room for the most important conversation the family had ever had. Thomas built up the fire until it cast dancing shadows on the walls, and Sarah made tea with herbs from their garden that would help everyone stay calm and focused. "Growing up is hard for everyone," Sarah began gently, looking at each twin in turn. "But for you two, it's especially complicated because you've never learned how to be separate people. You've always been two parts of one whole." Jacob fidgeted with his blue pendant, his eyes downcast. "Sometimes I forget which thoughts are mine and which ones are Joshua's. It's confusing and scary." Joshua nodded in agreement. "And sometimes I want to do something that Jacob doesn't want to do. But our bodies won't work right when we're not thinking the same thoughts." Thomas leaned forward in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Your mother faced the same challenge when she was your age. Maria told me that learning to be an individual while still maintaining her connection to others was the hardest thing she ever had to do." "What did she do?" Sarah asked, sensing that this was important information that could help the boys navigate their current struggles. "She spent time alone," Thomas replied. "Every day she would go off by herself for a few hours and practice being just Maria, not part of anyone else. She said it helped her understand where she ended and other people began." Sarah had an idea. "What if we tried that with Jacob and Joshua? Give them each time every day to be completely separate, to explore their own interests and develop their own personalities." The twins looked at each other uncertainly. They had never been truly apart for more than a few minutes at a time. The idea of intentional separation was both exciting and terrifying. "We could try," Jacob said slowly. "But what if something bad happens when we're not together? What if our abilities stop working?" "Then we'll figure out how to handle it," Sarah said firmly. "All of us as a family. That's what families do. We help each other through the difficult times and celebrate the good ones together." Thomas smiled at his new wife, proud of her wisdom and courage. "Maria would have liked you very much," he said quietly. "She always believed that love and understanding could overcome any challenge." As they made plans for helping the twins learn to be individuals while still honoring their special connection, Sarah felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. She was exactly where she was meant to be, helping this extraordinary family find their way through the complexities of growing up with gifts that set them apart from the rest of the world. The plan to help the twins develop individual identities began the very next morning. Sarah suggested they start small, with Jacob spending an hour alone in the east garden while Joshua worked by himself in the west garden. Thomas would stay near the house, ready to help if either boy had trouble managing his abilities without his brother's support. The first separation was harder than anyone had expected. Within 10 minutes, both boys were pale and shaking, their pendant stones flickering weakly as if struggling to maintain their connection to the twins' power. Jacob kept reaching for tools that weren't there, his hand automatically moving to places where Joshua would normally be standing. Joshua found himself trying to have conversations with plants, expecting responses that never came because his brother wasn't there to complete the mental conversation. "This is impossible," Jacob gasped when Sarah came to check on him. "I feel like half of me is missing. I can't think properly when Joshua isn't here." In the west garden, Joshua was having similar struggles. "My thoughts keep getting cut off in the middle," he explained to Thomas. "I start to think something and then there's just emptiness where Jacob's response should be." But Sarah had expected this difficulty. She had spent long hours talking with Thomas about Maria's experiences, learning about the challenges faced by people with extraordinary abilities. "It gets easier with practice," she assured both boys. "Your mother went through the same thing when she was learning to be independent." They tried again the next day and the day after that. Gradually, the periods of separation grew longer and less traumatic. Jacob discovered that he enjoyed working with his hands, carving small figures from pieces of wood he found around the property. Joshua found that he had a talent for understanding the patterns of weather and natural cycles, often predicting changes in the mountain's ecosystem with remarkable accuracy. After 2 weeks of practice, something wonderful happened. The twins were working separately in their respective gardens when a sudden thunderstorm rolled over the mountain. Instead of running to find each other as they would have done before, each boy instinctively used his abilities to protect his section of the garden from the damaging hail and wind. Sarah and Thomas watched from the kitchen window as Jacob created a shimmering barrier of energy over the east garden, while Joshua called upon the natural wind patterns to deflect the worst of the storm away from the west side. They were working independently but toward the same goal, their abilities complementing each other without the need for constant mental contact. "They're learning," Thomas said with pride and amazement. "They're becoming individuals while still maintaining their connection as brothers." As autumn deepened into winter, the family settled into new routines that honored both the twins' need for independence and their special bond. Mornings were spent together, sharing breakfast and planning the day's activities. Afternoons were for individual pursuits, with each person following their own interests and developing their unique talents. Evenings brought them back together for dinner, storytelling, and the quiet companionship that made their isolated house feel like a true home. Sarah found her own place in this extraordinary family, discovering abilities she never knew she possessed. Under Thomas's patient guidance, she learned to sense the emotional states of the people around her, to encourage plants to grow more abundantly, and even to predict small future events through careful observation of natural signs. "You were meant to be here," Thomas told her one snowy evening as they sat together by the fireplace. "The boys have grown more in these past few months than they had in years before you arrived. And he paused, searching for the right words. "I had forgotten what it felt like to have hope for the future." But their peaceful winter was interrupted in late February by an unexpected visitor. Sarah was hanging laundry near the house when she noticed a figure walking up the mountain path toward their home. Her heart began to race with fear. In all the months she had lived there, no one had ever come to visit. Thomas had always been careful to make their trips to town brief and unremarkable, never giving anyone reason to be curious about their mountain dwelling. The visitor was a woman, tall and graceful despite the difficulty of climbing through the deep snow. She wore a dark traveling cloak that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and her long black hair flowed behind her like a river of silk. Even from a distance, Sarah could sense something extraordinary about this stranger. Thomas came running when Sarah called for him, the twins close behind. But when Thomas saw who was approaching, he stopped dead in his tracks, his face draining of all color. The twins gasped in unison, their eyes wide with recognition and disbelief. "Maria," Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible above the wind. The woman who had been walking toward them broke into a run, snow flying up around her feet as she moved with inhuman speed and grace. The twins ran to meet her, their synchronized steps carrying them faster than Sarah had ever seen them move. When they reached their mother, all three of them embraced in a tangle of arms and tears and joyful laughter. Sarah stood frozen by the clothesline, watching a reunion she had never expected to witness. Maria was even more beautiful than Thomas's descriptions had suggested, with dark eyes that seemed to hold starlight and skin that glowed with health and vitality, despite her long journey through the mountains. When the initial excitement of reunion had passed, Maria turned her attention to Sarah. Her gaze was kind but searching, as if she could see directly into Sarah's soul and read every thought she had ever had. "You must be Sarah," Maria said, her voice like music carried on mountain wind. "Thomas has told me so much about you in his letters." "Letters?" Sarah looked at Thomas in confusion. "You've been writing to each other?" Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "I should have told you," he admitted. "Maria and I have found ways to communicate over the past year. She needed to know that the boys were safe and growing well, and she needed to know about you." Maria approached Sarah slowly, her movements fluid and graceful. "I know this must be shocking for you," she said gently. "Finding out that the woman you thought was gone forever has actually been watching over the family from a distance. But I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done. The boys have written to me about their progress, about how you've helped them learn to be individuals while still honoring their connection." Sarah felt a mixture of emotions washing over her. Relief that Maria was alive and safe, confusion about the family dynamics she had stumbled into, and uncertainty about what Maria's return would mean for her own place in the family. "Are you staying?" Sarah asked quietly, voicing the question that was most important to her. "Are you back for good?" Maria smiled, but there was sadness in her expression. "That depends on many things," she replied, "including whether the danger that drove me away has truly passed, and whether this family has room for both of us." As they walked toward the house together, Sarah realized that Maria's return would bring both joy and complications that none of them had anticipated. The family she had grown to love was about to change once again, and she could only hope that the bonds they had built would be strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table for the most complex meal of their lives. Maria sat beside Thomas, her presence both wonderful and unsettling as everyone tried to navigate the strange dynamics of her return. The twins could barely contain their excitement, chattering about everything they had learned and accomplished during her absence, but Sarah noticed they kept glancing between their parents with uncertainty. "Tell us about where you've been," Jacob urged, his blue eyes bright with curiosity. "We've wondered about you every single day." Maria smiled sadly, reaching across the table to touch both boys' hands. "I've been living with others like us," she explained. "People with abilities similar to ours who have also had to hide from the world. We've created a safe community and a place where we can practice our gifts openly without fear." "There are others?" Joshua asked, his green eyes wide with amazement. "Many others," Maria confirmed. "Families who can heal with touch, children who can speak with animals, elders who can see the threads that connect all living things. We've built a hidden valley where everyone can be themselves without pretending to be normal." Sarah felt a pang of something she couldn't quite identify. Was it jealousy, fear? The idea that there was a whole community of people like Thomas and the twins made her feel suddenly ordinary and out of place. Maria seemed to sense her discomfort. "But living there has taught me something important," she continued, her gaze moving to Sarah. "A community of only gifted people can become isolated from the rest of the world. We need bridges between our world and the everyday world. We need people who can help us stay connected to humanity, Thomas reached for Sarah's hand under the table, squeezing it gently. Sarah has been that bridge for us, he said firmly. She's helped the boys learn to control their abilities while still understanding how to live among regular people. She's taught them compassion and patience in ways I never could. The twins nodded enthusiastically. Sarah showed us how to help the townspeople without them knowing we were using our abilities, Jacob explained. Last month, when old Mr. Henderson's cow went missing, we helped guide it home by influencing the local wildlife to lead it back to his farm. And when Mrs. Patterson's garden was dying from disease, Sarah taught us how to heal the soil gradually, over several weeks, so it would look like natural recovery, Joshua added proudly. Maria's expression grew thoughtful as she listened to these stories. You've done well, she said, looking at both Thomas and Sarah. Better than I had hoped when I first left. The boys have grown into young men who understand both their power and their responsibility. After dinner, while the twins worked on their evening chores, the three adults sat by the fire to have the conversation they all knew was necessary. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and charged with unspoken tensions. I need to know why you really came back, Thomas said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. After all this time, what changed? Maria stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. The danger I was running from has evolved. The government agents I saw in my vision have been replaced by private organizations that are much more dangerous. They're not just interested in studying people like us anymore. They want to recruit us to use our abilities for purposes that go against everything we believe in. What kind of purposes? Sarah asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. Military applications, corporate espionage, political manipulation. Maria's voice was grim. They've learned that our gifts can be incredibly valuable tools for gaining power and control over others. And they're willing to separate families, threaten loved ones, and use any means necessary to force cooperation. Thomas's jaw tightened with anger. So hiding isn't enough anymore. They're actively hunting for people like us. Exactly. Which is why the community I've been living with has decided it's time to stop hiding and start protecting ourselves more actively. We're reaching out to isolated families like ours, offering them the choice to join us or to work with us to create a network of mutual support and protection. Sarah felt her world shifting beneath her feet. You want us to leave here? To abandon everything we've built? Not abandon, Maria corrected gently. Transform. We could all go to the valley together, where the boys could learn from other young people with similar abilities, where they could see that they're not alone in the world, and where Sarah would be the only person without special abilities, Thomas pointed out, his protective instincts clearly aroused, where she might feel like an outsider in her own family. Maria turned to look at Sarah directly, her dark eyes serious and searching. That's why I need to ask you something important, Sarah. Something that will change everything if you say yes. Sarah's heart began to race.
What are you asking?
I'm asking if you would be willing to undergo the awakening ritual. It's a process that can unlock latent abilities in people who have the potential, but have never accessed it. Not everyone can do it, but I sense something in you, a dormant gift that could be awakened with the right guidance. The room fell completely silent except for the crackling of the fire. Sarah stared at Maria, trying to process what she was being offered, the chance to become like them, to truly belong to this extraordinary family in ways she had never imagined possible. What would it involve? She asked cautiously. It's not dangerous, Maria assured her, but it is intense. You would need to open your mind completely, to trust me to guide you through a mental and spiritual journey that would unlock whatever abilities you were born with. Some people discover they can heal, others can influence growing things, still others can see glimpses of possible futures. Thomas was watching Sarah's face carefully, and she could see both hope and worry in his expression. You don't have to decide right now, he said softly. This is a choice that will affect the rest of your life. But even as he spoke, Sarah felt something stirring deep inside her, a recognition that this was the moment everything had been leading toward. All the small abilities she had developed over the past months, all the time she had felt connected to something larger than herself, had been preparing her for this choice. If I say yes, she asked quietly, and if it works, what happens then? Then we decide together what's best for our family, Maria replied. Whether we stay here and work with the network from a distance, whether we move to the valley, or whether we find some other path that honors both our gifts and our desire to remain connected to the wider world. The twins appeared in the doorway, drawn by the serious tone of the conversation. They looked at Sarah with expressions of hope and concern, clearly understanding that whatever decision she made would affect all of them. "We want you to choose what feels right to you," Jacob said seriously. "Whether you have abilities like ours or not, you're our family." Joshua nodded in agreement. "But if you decide to try the awakening, we'll be here to help you learn to use whatever gifts you discover. Just like you helped us learn to control ours." Sarah looked around at the faces of the people who had become her whole world. Thomas, whose quiet strength had taught her about real love. The twins, whose extraordinary abilities had shown her that the world was far more magical than she had ever imagined. And Maria, whose return had brought both complications and new possibilities. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made the choice that would determine not just her own future, but the future of the entire family she had grown to love. "I want to try," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was agreeing to. "I want to be part of this family in every way possible." The awakening ritual took place 3 days later, during the new moon, when Maria explained that the veil between the ordinary world and the world of hidden abilities was thinnest. They gathered in the stone circle behind the house, the same place where Sarah had first witnessed the twins' extraordinary gifts. Maria had spent those 3 days preparing Sarah through meditation, breathing exercises, and discussions about opening her mind to possibilities she had never imagined. Thomas and the twins created a supportive environment, sharing their own experiences of discovering and developing their abilities. As the sun set on the chosen evening, Sarah lay down in the center of the stone circle, while the others took positions around her. Maria knelt beside her head, placing gentle hands on Sarah's temples. The twins sat cross-legged at her feet, their pendant stones glowing softly in the gathering darkness. Thomas positioned himself near her heart, ready to provide strength and stability if the process became overwhelming. "Close your eyes and let your mind become completely quiet," Maria instructed, her voice taking on a hypnotic quality that seemed to resonate in Sarah's very bones. "Feel the earth beneath you, the sky above you, and the energy of the people who love you surrounding you with protection and support." Sarah felt herself sinking into a state of consciousness she had never experienced before. It was as if she was falling gently through layers of awareness, each one revealing new aspects of the world she had never noticed. She could feel the life force of every plant in the garden, the slow heartbeat of the mountain itself, and the intricate web of energy that connected all living things. As she went deeper, memories began to surface that she had forgotten or dismissed as childhood imagination, times when she had known things she shouldn't have known, when she had felt the emotions of animals and plants, when she had dreamed of events that later came true. All of these experiences had been real, but she had learned to ignore them because the adult world had taught her they were impossible. "Let go of everything you've been told about what's real and what isn't." Maria's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Trust what you feel, what you know in your heart to be true." Suddenly, Sarah felt something break open inside her mind, like a dam bursting and releasing a flood of sensation and awareness. She could feel the thoughts and emotions of everyone in the circle: Thomas's deep love and protectiveness, the twins' excitement and encouragement, Maria's gentle guidance and profound wisdom. But more than that, she could sense the network of people Maria had described, dozens of gifted individuals scattered across the country, all connected by invisible threads of shared understanding and mutual support. Her own gift revealed itself gradually, like dawn breaking over the mountains. She could perceive the life force in everything around her, and more importantly, she could influence it, not by forcing or controlling, but by encouraging and harmonizing. She could help sick plants become healthy, soothe frightened animals, and even ease emotional pain in the people she cared about. When the ritual was complete and Sarah opened her eyes, she was seeing the world through entirely new senses. The stone circle glowed with ancient energy that had been built up over years of use. The garden sparkled with the vital force of growing things, and the people around her shone with inner light that revealed their true nature more clearly than any physical appearance ever could. "How do you feel?" Maria asked gently, helping Sarah sit up slowly. "Different. Complete. Like I've been living with only half of myself for my entire life," Sarah replied, marveling at the richness of sensation that now surrounded her. "Is this how you all experience the world all the time?" You'll learn to moderate it, Thomas assured her, his eyes bright with joy at her successful awakening. At first it can be overwhelming, but with practice you'll be able to control when and how much you use your abilities. The twins were practically bouncing with excitement. Now we can really work together, Jacob said enthusiastically. Your gift complements ours perfectly. We can manipulate energy and matter, but you can sense and influence the life force itself. Over the following weeks, Sarah learned to use her new abilities with the same patience and dedication she had once applied to learning normal household skills. Maria proved to be an excellent teacher, guiding Sarah through exercises that helped her develop control and precision. She learned to heal minor injuries, encourage abundant harvests, and sense the emotional needs of the people around her. But the most important discovery came when they worked together as a complete family. Sarah's ability to sense and harmonize life force allowed her to help coordinate the twins' abilities in ways that had never been possible before. She could help them work together without losing their individual identities, creating a perfect balance between unity and independence. As spring arrived, bringing new growth to the mountain and new possibilities to their lives, the family faced a decision about their future. They had 3 choices: stay in their isolated mountain home, move to Maria's hidden community, or create something entirely new. I think we should stay here, Sarah said during one of their evening discussions, but not as hermits hiding from the world. We should become a bridge between the gifted community and the regular world, just like Maria said. We could help other families who are struggling with similar challenges, Thomas nodded thoughtfully. We could offer guidance to parents whose children are developing abilities, help them understand that their children aren't dangerous or broken, just different. And we could create a safe haven for young people who need time to learn control before they're ready to rejoin the wider world, Maria added, her eyes bright with the possibility. The twins exchanged one of their synchronized looks, then Jacob spoke for both of them. We want to help other kids like us understand that being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something that can be used to make the world better. Joshua nodded in agreement. And we want to stay here, where Sarah learned to be part of our family and we all learned to be ourselves. As they made plans for their new mission, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction and purpose. She had started this journey as a frightened 18-year-old girl being given away to strangers. She was ending it as a woman with extraordinary abilities, surrounded by a family who loved and valued her, and ready to help others discover the magic that existed within themselves and the world around them. The secret that had once isolated Thomas and his sons had become the foundation for a new kind of family, one that bridged the gap between the ordinary and the extraordinary, proving that love and understanding could overcome any challenge, and that the most powerful magic of all was the bond between people who chose to care for each other unconditionally. In the years that followed, their mountain home became a sanctuary for others like them, a place where young people could learn to control their gifts and families could find the support they needed to navigate the challenges of raising gifted children. Sarah's awakening had not only transformed her own life, but had opened the door to helping countless others discover their own hidden potential and find their place in a world that was far more magical than most people ever dared to imagine.